Welcome back to the 259th episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through some of the top stories, including how that case that was actually going to break up the real estate cartel may have not done what you thought it did, and how the Mara-lago case may not be going in Jack Smith's favor, and of course, an article closing it all out, talking about how Republicans think that the college campus crisis is actually going to come out in their favor. And of course, we will end today with our Daily Delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive, ready to take on the day. Now, that's enough rambling from me. Let's jump in to our daily debate. So, when you first heard about the real estate bungle that was going on, okay, so hey, they're conspiring to have, 5% fees here, 6% fees here. So then basically the buyer is getting screwed and it's the agents who are getting a little bit extra money. And you heard about these court cases where they had to settle and it was actually changing things. Did you actually see it as a win? Did you hear all the details? Did you not? I want to know where everybody stands on the story, because when I was seeing it, it was a big story. I mean, I was reading it out of the the Wall Street Journal. That's where I first saw it. And I thought this was huge because at one point I did want to go into the real estate business, and it was a passing thing. It was like 6 months. I researched getting my license, what the average compensation, things like that were. And these fees are a large part of the compensation package. So if this really was going to change up the whole thing and really restructure it so they couldn't charge more than 2 or 3% in these fees and then split that, 1.5 for the buyer and seller, I was like, okay, wow, real estate brokers and agents are going to take a huge hit here. Turns out it's not quite that simple. So I'm going to stop dancing around it. We're going to get into this article that comes from RealClearPolitics. The headline reads, Jack Ryan's mission to free the real estate market. So you may be thinking, wait, Jack Ryan, isn't he one of Tom Clancy's characters? Yes, you are correct. He is one of Tom Clancy's characters, but not this guy. This gentleman was a banker, an investment banker, and he was trying to disturb the housing/real estate industry with a no fee, or at least a minimal fee, sort of brokerage service that was mainly based online. And then he kind of got, he kind of got pushed out. And this is because of a few different changes in the system. Zillow, who he was working with, actually started partnering with the NAR. And if you don't know what that is, that's the National Association of Realtors. Let me double check that to make sure I am not absolutely crazy. Took a brief break, found the paragraph. Yes, it is indeed the National Association of Realtors. Now, let's give a little bit of background on the NAR for those of you who are not aware. Quote, NAR is America's largest trade group, boasting some 1.5 million members. The organization holds enormous sway over the economics of the residential real estate industry. Namely, it essentially requires realtors to join one of more than 800 local real estate cooperatives known as multiple listing services. From this point on, we'll just call them MLSs. To effectively access and participate in the marketplace, the whole while imposing rules governing the realtors' policies and practices. So they say, hey, if you want access to this multiple listing services where all the other brokers are and all these other people that are part of our guild, of our trade association, you can have access to this. You know that this person is certified, that they have gone through, and they are also participating in the same way that you are. Basically, it's the market regulating itself. You always hear arguments about when antitrust comes up. There was talk a while ago about Facebook, Google, technically Google's not a social media company, but technically they own YouTube. So anything that was in the social media sphere and the algorithms, how they were affecting certain things, the government at one point, and this is not saying that the government's doing this in this case, but I'm pointing out that the government quite clearly said, hey, either you need to regulate yourselves, you need to get yourselves in control, or we will step in and regulate you. And this is often a very normal practice in lots of different industries that are, they have some sort of practices that may be seen as antitrust or at least infringing upon the, I don't want to say absolute functioning of the free market, but they definitely are dominated by certain firms or certain practices. And in order to not actually get in trouble, they codify these things. They make sure that they're backing up all these rules and regulations in order to make things fair, to make it more, easy for brokers to put their stuff out there and put it on the market, but also to have a place where sellers can go to a broker and get access to everything else. It seems like on the surface, hey, okay, we're trying to make it really simple for people to sell their houses, and in order to get the brokers who are on the other end to get their buyers out there in the field and see all these houses that are on sale. The thing that they don't equate for is, well, what about the freelancers? What about the people who aren't part of these trade associations? These MLSs actually restrict access. They say, hey, you don't have access to these preferred houses. Like, you don't see them on any of these different listing sites. Maybe you don't know that they're on the market. Maybe you actually don't get to work with the seller at all because the seller's saying, oh, well, hey, there's not another broker over there. Or there's the opposite effect. Maybe brokers don't go to independent sellers because they're saying, oh, there's not a seller broker over there who's going to give me a really good fee. Maybe the seller doesn't want to give the other broker, the one who's bringing the client to the table, he doesn't want to give them the 6% that they normally split between themselves. Maybe it's 3% that they would split between themselves because the seller's content making a little bit of money and really just getting back the money that he invested in the house or she invested in the house in the first place. So you can see how this MLS would actually narrow basically, let me put it this way. If you're looking through a telescope, you're looking out in a neighborhood and you're seeing all these different red flags pop up all over the place. The MLS, if you are part of the broker network, is a wide lens that you're putting on the end of the telescope. You're able to see more. You can see more of the red flags. Maybe there's one across the street, so on and so forth. And then if you're not on any of these MLSs, it's not like you're just looking through the telescope alone. You're also looking through a pinhole in the telescope because the other brokers don't want to work with you. They're actually limiting your access to either buying or selling. So these MLSs could be seen as antitrust, and they have come under question. And guess what? Jack Ryan has been going after them, especially with his company that he was creating, but his company actually went defunct. But hey, that's enough. Let's go back to the article here. Quote, collectively, Ryan estimates that assuming an average brokerage fee of 5.5% in the United States versus about 1.5% in other European and Asian nations, that $3 trillion worth of annual transactions brokers collect out of the $3 trillion. The brokers collect $120 billion in commissions from Americans yearly. That is greater than the estimated $75 billion in taxes collected annually on U.S. oil sales. Hence, the argument that the realtors represent a large cartel or a larger cartel than OPEC. And this is one of his, it's one of his talking points. I'll be honest. It's not that he's wrong because, yes, they do actually bring in more money than some of these oil companies do, or at least that the taxes that they bring in. So, hey, cool. Yeah, I hear your argument. It's really, he's just a brilliant salesman, and he's trying to make it sound relatable. He's trying to really market it to people who don't understand the issue. He's saying, hey, look, okay, we already have a problem with OPEC. Look here. This is basically the real estate OPEC. This is REPEC or REPEC. I don't know how he would abbreviate it because he's a better salesman than me. So obviously he has his analogy down and I'm just trying to copy it. But my point being that this is a lot of money that is on the table, and there's a lot of money that some sellers are not getting, and there's a lot of money that some buyers have to pay. Because guess what? When you have these extra commission fees, sometimes sellers, instead of saying, okay, hey, we're going to take it straight off the top because we can afford to lose that extra $50K or maybe $25K off of the money that we would get back, they actually raise their prices a little bit. They kind of build in the commission into that rate. So then they can say, okay, hey, we're going to pay you out your money and we're still going to get a equal or fair value for our house, which is only fair. I mean, if you've had a house for 25 years, you've seen the area expand around it, you know you can get good money for it, and then with the commission, with the rate that the brokers are taking out, you're basically selling it for the price you bought it. It's like, well, then why did I buy it in the first place? It didn't appreciate enough. So either you have to wait longer for it to appreciate more, which means you're taking a risk if things might go downhill, or you just sell it at that price and let the commissioners take the money out, or you do the other thing, which is, okay, hey, well, we're just going to assume other people are going to do the same thing, and we're just going to raise our price a little bit to include the commission so we can still make fair market value for our house that we think is worth it. And this is one of the things that Jack Ryan is trying to point out. He has taken this on. He created his own business, which is called Real Estate Exchange in 2015. He was going to make a deal with Zillow, like I was describing earlier. But then, guess what? NAR actually made a deal with Zillow to let them in on some of the MLSs and some of the network features. So Zillow could actually make money off of some of the fees of recommending people to these particular houses because they opened their own brokerage house. And then the money that they would, I don't want to say lose, but the money that they wouldn't get from advertising for some of these houses or other houses, they make up for in these brokerage fees, and it all comes underneath the Zillow house. Now, Mr. Ryan's a little bit more conspiratorial. He's saying, hey, no, they did this on purpose. They saw my company coming. They knew I was a disruptor, which he was a disruptor, and then goes on to say that they offered this deal to him, and guess what? Zillow backed out basically 6 months later, but it was right before his company was going for an IPO, so the whole IPO basically fell apart. It didn't go well for him whatsoever, and the company's basically defunct. And then guess what? Zillow backs out, or the NAR and Zillow, they come to different terms. They actually back out of the agreement that they were in, and then boom, he's out of the market. The disruptor's gone, and they still get to keep their commissions, and Zillow still keeps to keep advertising some of these different houses from the MLSs on there, even though they're not getting the full breadth of coverage, and their brokerage business isn't doing as well, but they still get a lot of advertising dollars. So this is Jack Ryan saying, okay, hey, whoa. This is obviously something going on here. They're working together. They are being conspiratorial. And he has started filing lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. He's going with the DOJ. He's trying to convince them to go after them for antitrust. And the reason that he keeps pressing, because this settlement that came in not that long ago from, I believe it was a class action lawsuit in Missouri, they were looking for a lot of money at first. I believe it was somewhere around $5.1 billion. Quote, he says originally on the table was $5.1 billion, and that's just one state. And it's not even one of the biggest states for real estate transactions. And then somehow 6 months later, all class actions settle for $418 billion. That makes no sense. And he's basically going on to say here that they are not actually changing anything. Quote, to get there, he says, would require wholesale reforms. He sees obvious grounds for them, beginning with the Constitution's Commerce Clause. If states cannot put up artificial barriers to trade, he says, why should trade groups? And which would include the hundreds of MLSs that each operate according to rules set by their members at the direction of the NAR. Beyond those efforts, he says, the last best hope is the DOJ. And it recently was permitted by federal appeals court to reopen the antitrust probe into the NAR. And if I said the NRA a second ago, I was just in the zone. It's the NAR. The whole thing that he is doing here is he's saying back up, okay? These commissions that they're saying, okay, hey, we're going to tell people up front. We're going to tell people what those commissions will be up front. That was one of the main things about the lawsuit, because a lot of these buyers and sellers didn't know about all of them. That doesn't change the fact that these commissions are still too high, and that nobody else is really going to be able to find anything different, because these MLSs basically follow the guidelines of the NAR on a national level. And if they say that 5 is standard, then almost all of them will go 5 is standard. And if they keep doing things like Mr. Ryan claims, which appear to be colluding with other people in the industry, or at least using their large sway and the power they have in order to push out incumbents, then they can keep that 5% rate extremely high, or 5 to 6% rate extremely high, and still make sure that all their people that are in their MLSs that are a part of their broker networks can still get their high commission fees. And that's why when you saw that story saying, oh, it's going to change the real estate industry, and then you didn't hear much hubbub after that. You said, oh, okay, hey, or at least in my opinion, I said, okay, hey, I guess I'm not going into real estate anytime soon. And then you read something like this, and it makes you realize that just because something doesn't go the way of these large industries, just because it doesn't go the way of somebody who is a defendant who's claiming, no, I didn't do anything wrong, just because there's one punishment that gets put on the board doesn't mean it actually solves any of these issues. So we need to watch out for this, because guess what? The DOJ underneath Biden is going for a lot of antitrust. And remember what happened when Rockefeller had his case in front of the Supreme Court and they actually made him break up Standard Oil, he still controlled all of the different companies, and he was able to participate a little bit more regionally and, change the prices based on where he was, and he was able to operate it and still had a very wealthy, successful career afterwards. So if they just do something that they say, hey, this is going to be exactly what's happening here in this situation from now on, we're setting this new rule, and it doesn't actually work as intended, did they actually do anything good? Did it actually limit their power, or was it just a means of showing the people that they're doing something? And yes, I'm not going to say that putting out the commission rates ahead of time is not a good thing. Sure. But did it have the intended effect of actually lowering costs in the housing market and helping these new homeowners, old homeowners, any homeowner, any seller or buyer out? It's a little bit of a mixed bag. So when we see these other antitrust suits going through, against Google, I believe Amazon, Apple, you need to watch out for false results. Are they going to split things up and have them still underneath a mother company, or at least owned by the same shareholders, and they can basically work together? These are all different complicated questions, and watch out for the false positive. We did it. We broke up this company, and it ends up not changing anything. Let's be clear. I'm not saying antitrust policy needs to always be put in place. I'm not saying that all these companies need to be broken up. What I'm saying is, if you're going to do it right. If you're going to limit their power. And I'm not saying that it's a good thing or a bad thing, but you're already going down this road. So if you're going to do it right, and don't do something that's just on its face looks nice as a news story. Oh, we broke up Google. We moved their data storage company away from their algorithm company, so now they actually have to raise fees, so it's going to be more competitive in the marketplace. And what I mean by that is they can't just use their competitive advantage with the large swaths of data they have. They actually have to sell it to their other sister companies rather than just being able to give them through generous contracts. I don't know. Let's be clear. That's a really rare situation. I don't think it actually happens that way. But my point being, things like that, where they can cooperate right now, they can work together, and then the government comes in, says, hey, we're splitting it up, and it doesn't actually change anything because they could still make those really nice contracts, rather than actually finding fundamental ways to reshape the market and fundamental ways to do the job that they say they want to do, which is limit the power of these big corporations. Don't just look out for the, snazzy headline with no bite. You want the bark and the bite if you're going to do it right. Like I said, I would have to go on a case-by-case basis on all of these different antitrust ones, but I just wanted to point out in general, Jack Ryan, he has been fighting this battle for a long time, and he's saying that these cases, they don't do exactly what's intended, and he even makes a better argument for doing it in the free market. And that's what he was saying with his company at the very beginning. His company was trying to, I don't want to say artificially, but he was trying to force down the rates. He was actually not going through these MLSs. He was doing it at maybe a commission rate of like 1.5, and he was trying to use the free market to do it. And if anything, antitrust needs to come in when the barriers are too high and they can actually stifle the competition, rather than just saying, too many people like them and that gives them too much power. I think that would be, if you're going to make any argument for antitrust, which there is an argument for antitrust, but if you're going to make any argument for antitrust, that's the strongest one. Also, interesting note, and it's always funny when antitrust conversations come up, the people always say, well, hey, look, they're captured by the government. The regulators aren't doing their job. The government's not doing its job. It's not stepping in. It's not limiting the power of these corporations. And I would say, well, look at the case that's presented in front of us, the NAR. They are one of the largest lobbying groups in the entire United States. So it's not that the regulators aren't doing their job. And what I mean by that is they're not doing the job that people want, who want these large groups to be broken up. That's how they would describe doing their job, breaking them up, limiting their power. But no, they are doing their job. They're just doing it in favor of the people that are paying them a lot of money. And that's why we need to take a serious look at lobbying, because if there's regulatory capture, if these organizations, these large trade groups essentially can come in and say, well, hey, you're writing this new rule, which is going to dictate the entire market. Maybe you say that firms have to, at a particular size, have to have certain things in place. And guess what? We already have those in place. So that's actually great. We're trying to lead the industry. And then one of their largest competitors doesn't have them in place. It would be too costly in order to put some of those safety measures in place. And then they're out of business. So you see things like this. It's called regulatory capture. You've heard me talk about it before. It's a serious conversation. And if we're going to have the conversation about antitrust, it has to be in there. But I kind of got a little bit off track. I'm sorry. It's just I get really passionate about that one because it is an in-depth conversation. And we've seen lots of movement from the Biden administration. So it is something that is very relevant right now. And like I said, if you're going to go after something, if you're going to use the tools of government in order to break apart companies, in order to, I don't want to say invade, but get in the business of the people, do it right. If you're going to use your power to coerce people, do it for the right things, not the wrong things. And if you do it for the wrong things, or even just, try to do it for the right things, but end up failing, you are not doing your job. Because guess what? The only justification we give you as the people to violate our rights, to come in and violate our property, or in order to right a wrong, is in order to make a situation better. So if you do something that violates my security, my freedom, my liberty, I understand that sometimes I do give that up, but I don't give that up for incompetent governance. I give that up for people I trust and who will truly use any sort of leeway I give them to the best of their ability and actually get things done on my behalf, which will make my life better and not need the government to keep interfering in order to remedy the situation that they couldn't fix in the first place. But hey, sorry. Once again, I got really passionate there. My point being, don't screw it up. You're already walking down this path. Don't screw it up. All right, so let's jump to our second article. And both of these next two articles are a little bit shorter. They're kind of just updates of situations, so I want to go through them pretty darn quickly. The first one comes from, or the first of the last two, wow, way to make it complicated, Alex, come from AlterNet. The headline reads, "Huge problem. New allegation by a Trump lawyer could derail Jack Smith's Mara-lago case." So I'm going to do the first two paragraphs. They always have like their summary paragraphs, so it gives a nice lead in to where I want to start having a further conversation. Quote, U.S. District Judge Aline Cannon still hasn't set a trial date in former President Donald Trump's classified documents case in the Southern District of Florida. And a date could be even further off after new allegations leveled by a member of Trump's defense team. The Daily Beast reported that Stanley Woodward, an attorney for Trump's body man, Walt Nauta, is alleging vindictive prosecution by the Department of Justice Special Counsel Jack Smith. This stems from an incident in which the prosecutor, Jay Bratt, who is working under Smith, reportedly inferred that Woodward's representation of Nauta could complicate a possible judicial appointment in Washington, D.C. courts. Defense lawyers also say that Bratt engaged in a campaign of intimidation and harassment against Woodward to exert pressure. So the allegations coming here from Mr. Woodward is that, okay, you got the guy who's underneath Mr. Smith here, Jay Bratt, and he's basically saying, hey, my dude, I'm happy that you're on the other side of this case. Absolutely love you. I know that they were considering you for an appointment in Washington, for a judgeship. Yeah, this case, it may get in the way. The timeline make things a little bit hard. Maybe it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get you into that position. It could be something as simple as that. It could be that simple. And then Woodward, whether or not you agree that that is enough to say that Mr. Bratt was inferring that this could stop me from getting the judgeship, Woodward's going to take that to the bank because in this case, when it comes down to it, Mar-a-Lago is probably one of, and I hate to sound like all the other pundits, is probably one of the strongest cases against Trump because guess what? The files were in his Mar-a-Lago residence. And then we have the tape that came out afterwards where he was waving around papers. He says they weren't actual documents, but the tape basically, I don't want to say confirms because, We live in a world where anything can be denied, but it definitely does not help his case. So this is definitely a strong one against him. So just like how there was a little bit of an incident with Fonnie Willis, they were trying to, pick it apart. This is the job of lawyers. This is why you pay them so much money, to find the complicated situations, to find the little edge case. Maybe we can delay it here. Maybe we can delay it there. Maybe we can get it put off on the docket until after the election so that you can get elected president. And then people don't want to prosecute you because you're prosecuting a president who is currently in office. Or maybe he can, say, hey, no, I'm going to pardon myself. Whatever it may be, the lawyers are doing their job here, and Brat may have messed up. He should have known whether or not he was implying anything. Maybe he was just being 100% straightforward here, saying, yeah, no, this could mess with your timeline to be appointed to the judgeship. I know it's coming. I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of it too. He could have been saying in complete honesty, not doing, and let's be clear, Brat denies it. But even if he could just say, he was just saying it in the most honest of terms, in the kindest way, like, hey, yeah, you're up for a judgeship, right? Like, this is obviously going to interfere with the timeline. What you thinking? He's just asking him a question. He's just making a statement. It can get construed, and it will be used by the lawyers in order to get the case moved, thrown out, this vindictive prosecution charge added on, or even have the whole thing dismissed. So it's definitely an interesting one. And if you want to read this whole article, it's actually pretty short from AlterNet, but it briefs the whole thing, talks about the back and forth. You can check out the links in the description below that like and subscribe button. I have them all down there for all the articles, including the Daily Delight. So let's jump to our last article. It's going to be a really quick one. It's from Fox News. Republicans believe college campus chaos works in their favor. And I'll be honest, the headline is enough to describe what they're going through here. But I'll just read one quote from the middle of it. Quote, the cynic might argue the Republicans are exploiting the Democrat schism, but the GOP really doesn't need to do that much. The Daily Collegiate Contrepoints, sorry, I just had the iPad speak that before I started here, speaks for itself. Just wanted to sound a little bit fancy. Let's keep going on the quote. Well, neither part, frankly, has much of a legislative agenda for the rest of the year. The foreign aid package is complete. TikTok is on the books. Months of work on bipartisan border security package basically evaporated within minutes over the winter. Nothing exists in a vacuum. So the university melees simply represent the GOP with an opening. And the GOP is seemingly better equipped to grapple with the issue than Democrats. And this is because the GOP, for the most part, presents a pretty united front on Israel versus the Democrats who, like they were speaking about here, have the schism where there's a little bit of debate. Okay, well, hey, we've normally supported Israel, but we think that Palestine is full of people who are being oppressed. So there's the argument that it's the intersectional coalition saying the people that are oppressed, we need to defend them versus the classical liberals. I think it's not wrong in that the people who are supporting Palestine are definitely using that argument. I think that there was already a growing contingent of people that support Palestine in that conflict because it's been more mainstreamed in the colleges. Now, is that because of the intersectional idea that people that are oppressed need to be uplifted, that they need to be put in the front of the line? Maybe. Or it could just be that this is something where AIPAC or any person or any, I don't want to make it like, any of the influence groups, because that's not fair at all. The idea that Israel was always the person being attacked was really prominent during the 60s, the 70s, a little bit of the 80s, a little bit in the 90s as well. But as things kind of turned around in the United States and globally towards an anti-Islam approach, you saw a little bit of a pushback in popular culture after the 2000s saying, hey, we can't just say that Islam is the problem, because there was a huge push from people in the West saying, hey, this is a group that we really need to watch out for. There was a lot of skepticism of anybody who was of the Muslim origin or anyone who practices Islam because of the terror attacks that we were experiencing. And this is kind of a natural backlash that developed during that time. People were seeing the agreement that was happening between Israel and Palestine in around like 2006, 2007. They saw Israel pull out the troops and then leave Gaza to its own accord. And then there were still rocket attacks. And then Israel would attack back. So the situation has definitely changed. The story has definitely changed. People are seeing a different side. More information is able to come out also because of social media. You're able to see into those places, see the conditions that they're living in rather than just how it's reported. So things have definitely changed. And I feel like if there's one side that's going to be more empathetic to that from the very beginning, it's going to be people on the left, because a lot of people on the left have very big hearts, and they are, I don't want to say ruled, but they are led by compassion, and especially nowadays, over the last 10 to 15 years, the shift has been compassion versus hard realism. That was the split in like the 80s, 70s, but it wasn't matched with the rising coverage from within Gaza, and also the changing in dynamics and the backlash from some of the U.S.'s and other Western countries' politics, their projection of power across the world, and the different fear-mongering, but maybe that's a little strong, just the narratives that were being pushed. There was a natural backlash from that, and all those things kind of culminated at the same time. So I don't want to say it's just the intersectional ideology, even though I think that plays a strong part in it, but there are lots of people who don't necessarily agree with the whole intersectional ideology that still say, no, Palestine needs to have its voice heard on the international stage. It needs to have some sort of representation. And while I don't know of anyone in the Democratic Party that holds that specific line and isn't making it about oppressed oppressor narratives or a pure power narrative, oh, Israel has so much power and Gaza doesn't, that doesn't mean they don't exist. So I don't want to just blankly make a statement that is not fair and say, oh, it's all about the intersectionalism, because that's basically what Fox is alluding to when they're talking about the schism. That's what a lot of people on the right are talking about. And I know lots of people that I've listened to who are progressive who say it's not all about the oppressor. I've also heard lots of people who they bring on who are talking in terms of oppressor-oppressed narratives. But it's not so black and white. And just like I've categorized people on the right in a very specific way, you could break that down a million ways. Because, yeah, there are people that don't support Israel, and it has nothing to do with Israel as a nation and its policies. It's literally just, hey, you know what? We want to keep our money here in America. And there are other people who will probably say, yeah, no, it is about Israel's policies. So guess what? It isn't one for one. But does that mean that the GOP can't come together because a majority of them still support Israel around this and take advantage of it? I think that's definitely true. I just think they're misdiagnosing where the schism is coming from, or at least not attributing all the facts to it. Then again, did you listen through that whole thing? If you listen through this whole thing, I respect you, but normally these sound bites get clipped down to about 5 minutes, and it's a discussion where multiple people have to talk throughout the entire thing. So they couldn't have that long, in-depth breakdown, and you know, it kind of gets passed over. So it's an interesting conversation for sure. I think it's going to be one that does define the election. I think they're right about that, at least. So let's jump to our Daily Delight. And this one comes from Outdoors. And the headline reads, "Black bears on a swan boat is everything we needed today." And yes, it is for black bears on a swan boat. You know, the zookeepers who are overseeing this particular enclosure, I don't know the technical name for it, but they said, hey, you know what, we're going to help out the black bears. We're going to give them a good day. There's a little bit of extra rain, so we can put this swan boat in there, and then they can, you know, jump on it and have a fun time. And they absolutely did. If you want to see any of the photos from this article, or you want to see the TikTok video that goes along with it, you can find all of that along with all the other articles in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Google Podcasts, as well as Podvine, and the Twitter handle @YourDailyFlip, where I post a Twitter tirade every Tuesday and Thursday. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.